I don't know how it works. So.
Credit or blame, whichever you want. Right.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to get through 17, finish up 17, get through 18, 19, and 20. Pretty 18, or sorry, well, really 18 and 19 and 20 are all pretty simple. Most of it we know. There's not a ton of changes, just a little bit in terms of how we actually drop now, and just dealing with the concept of relief areas again and how we have to adjust the dropping to do with that. But I guess first off, we would like to thank Meadowbrook for having us and putting this together. It's a nice setup, and appreciate everyone on the call joining as well. All right, so we got through the basic relief procedures on how to take relief from a penalty area. Now we're going to talk about what happens when you're in the penalty area, you try to play out, and it doesn't get out, unfortunately, which never happens. Never happens. Right? But if that does happen, and there's the writing here, but honestly, the best way to go through this is just look at the pictures first. So we'll do that, and we'll work our way back to the words. But these two diagrams here on pages 153 and 152 and 153 are really good and really makes it quite easy to understand how it works. So basically, you have the player is at point A here on the screen, or on the I guess on the screen, whether you're looking at it here in person or on your computer or whatever. But they go from point A to point B here, so they're still within the same penalty area. So obviously, at that point in time, they can continue to play from point B if they'd like. But if they want to take relief from that point, then there's really four options. So they can go stroke and distance by playing from where the previous stroke was made at point A. So they could go back and try their luck again if they really thought that they had a shot from there. Or they can really use the old reference point, so to speak, and go back and take those options. So they can go back on a line, which you can see that's option number 2 with the flag and where they last crossed the edge of the penalty area, and they can go back on that line and take a drop. And then obviously when they go back on that line, you're going to get one club length from where your reference point is, no closer to the hole. Then the other option is to take your lateral relief area two club lengths, no closer to the hole. So that's option 3 there. And then your final option is to just go back and play from where you last played from, but using that shot or that point A as your reference there. Okay.
Is number 4 option, is that a new option?
No, that's always been
You're playing from A.
That's always been the case.
Okay.
And so and all these are just an additional penalty. So there's no, it's not a 2-stroke penalty. The only time it's going to be a 2-stroke penalty is if the player drops, they hit to B, and then they think that they're going to be able to hit at A again. They drop there, and then at that point they determine that they can't play it, or when they drop, it goes into deeper water, or marsh or whatever. And then at that point, it's going to cost them 1 to get out. So this is one that's really commonly misunderstood in terms of it's a 2-stroke, it's a 1-stroke, it's going to be a 1, but it will be a 2 if you go back and drop at point A and then decide that you can't play it.
Yeah, 1 for the drop and 1 for removing it out of the hazard, or
right,
out of the penalty area.
Correct.
This is just the old regression rule, right?
Exactly. There's really no change here except for the fact that the dropping procedure is a tad bit different on the line back, and then in this case the stroke and distance option is the same, but we know that if we go back stroke and distance and it's not at the tee or on the green, you've got that 1 club length from that point as opposed to the exact spot. Right. All right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
Good picture.
All right, so now we're gonna go to where a ball is played and comes to rest in the same penalty area, but having exited and then re-entered. Okay, so in this case, we play from A and we hit a nice little snap hook here and crosses the red penalty area and goes to point B. But we're still in the same penalty area. So if we have 4 options again. We can go back to where we last played from under stroke and distance to point A here. Okay, and then we can go back in a line with the flag and where we crossed, but our reference point is now going to be this X here where we last crossed. Okay, because now we're not using that old reference point there. We're using the current one where it last crossed. And then same thing, we can take our 2 club lengths from that point. Or our 4th option is to go back to where we played from previously before the ball was in the penalty area. And all those, again, are just 1 stroke. And then if we did go back and drop at point A again, and we didn't like it, then we'd have an additional penalty stroke. And then in that case, let's see, in that case, the option is still, so in that case, the only, if I'm reading this correctly, the only difference between this one and this one is that obviously the ball comes out, but if we did go back and drop at point 1, our reference point would still be X in this. It's not necessarily where we crossed here on this shot. We're gonna still use this X as a reference point. So if you ever get confused about these pictures are great. I know that whenever people ask me a question, I just turn to this one because it's just really easy to understand once you see it, and might be harder to talk through with someone. But if someone has a question on this and you're on the course, I would just get the book out and show them, and it'll be a lot easier for them to understand if they've got a picture, or you can carry around like a small whiteboard with you and draw it out if you want. But I wouldn't recommend that.
You have the book. Yeah.
We may have this more often now that you're allowed to do more things playing out of the penalty area.
Yeah, you're right.
Get a junior that thinks that he can play out of the penalty area and gets himself into more trouble.
This is
and it's there's going to be a lot more areas marked as penalty areas that aren't traditionally, and so it's going to be, it could go from a heather area to maybe there's heather right before them within the same penalty area. There's a pond, and in that case it probably is going to happen quite a bit more often. Yeah. All right. So what happens though if it goes out of bounds and doesn't stay in the same penalty, or if it's lost, or it becomes unplayable? Yeah.
Draw one.
Draw one out. Place it in there. Yeah. Yeah. So in this case here, we're going to, if it's out of bounds or lost, we obviously have to go back under stroke and distance. Unplayable is a little bit different. But if it's stroke and distance, then we're basically going to go back to where we last played from, right? So if we use an example, that last example, it'd be that point A. Okay, and then at that point, if the player has the option to take relief from the penalty area.
You got a picture on 252 in a big book.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
There you go.
Yeah. I didn't go far enough. Yeah.
How would you know?
How would you know?
Okay, so it's the picture is still there, Gene. So we're good.
Yay,
We're
it
good.
is.
But
it's not in the
it's
ruler.
not in the small one that
It's not in
we're
the
also
ruler.
carrying around
That's
with us. So, But
Wow.
basically what that picture is saying is that if we're always going to go back, if it's lost, we have to go back to that point A. And then at that point, we can either, obviously we can play it again for a stroke and distance, or at that point we can take relief from the penalty area. And if we do that, we're going to use that old reference point where we last crossed. And then when we do that, it's going to be an additional penalty. So we'll have 2-stroke penalty in this case, 1 for the stroke and distance, 1 for taking relief from the penalty area. But the player can just take, they don't necessarily have to drop in there. They can just take relief from the penalty area. But if they, using that old reference point, or that, I shouldn't say reference point, it's not necessarily, well, actually in the case of if you're taking 2 club lengths, it is a reference point. But if you use that point where you last crossed, then if you don't drop it at point A, then you're basically just going to take 2 strokes though. If you just say, I'm not dropping, but I am going to take it out of the
Well, you
penalty
can play
area.
it again from the penalty area
With only 1, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And you can drop it and you get a free drop. In other words, you can drop it and look at it. It's not, because it's going to cost you 2 anyway to get at it.
Correct,
Which
yes.
you can't do under the other.
Right,
pictures.
correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that free drop that Gene said is still going to be, or is going to be in play here, but not in the previous one. So I guess it doesn't necessarily hurt you to drop it in this case. All right. Any questions about this one? And then really, when it says unplayable here, we're really just talking about that first option under the unplayable, which we'll get to here in a sec. But we're not talking, obviously, if we're talking about going on a line back or with the lateral relief or 2 club lengths, we're going to use it at the point where it's unplayable. We're not going to go reference back to point A in that picture. We're really just, when we say unplayable in this one, we're really just talking about the going back to where you last played from option under the unplayable. All right, now there's a few things though, or a few situations where we're not gonna get relief. So when our ball is in a penalty area, there's no relief for interference by an abnormal course condition. So if our ball's in a penalty area and there's a sprinkler head, we're not gonna get relief from that. Okay, if our ball is embedded in the penalty area, we're not gonna get relief from that. If it's unplayable, or if we deem it unplayable, we actually can't take an unplayable in a penalty area. So if we're going to take relief from those situations, we just would take relief from the actual penalty area under the options that we talked about last week. Okay, but when a dangerous animal condition interferes with the play of a ball in a penalty area, the player may either take free relief in the penalty area or penalty relief outside the penalty area. So we talked about that last week as well. One of the options, if it is the one that I use where I gave the player free relief and I shouldn't have, in that case, she could have dropped the ball in that same water hazard or now penalty area, but I just gave her free relief, which should have cost her a penalty, but I was just didn't know the rules.
Nice guy.
And she got it for free there. All right. Any questions before we close on 17 and move to 18?
That free relief in the penalty area, once again, closer to the flag stick, correct? In other words, you've got a dangerous animal. The only place to drop it is closer to the flag stick. Then you don't have the choice. You have to go outside.
Correct, yes. All right, 18 is pretty straightforward here. Not a ton of changes in terms of how we go about these rules, stroke and distance. We talked about this a lot with the other rules that we've gone over in terms of a relief option. We're also going to talk about lost or out of bounds. Again, I think we talked about that briefly in terms of the time it takes to make a ball lost now, or the time we had to search for it. We talked about that when we were talking about searching for the ball. And then we're going to talk about provisional ball as well. So Rule 18 covers taking relief under penalty of stroke and distance when the ball is lost outside of penalty area or comes to rest out of bounds. The required progression of playing from the teen area to the hole is broken. The player must resume that progression by playing again from where the previous stroke was made. And this rule also covers how and when a provisional ball may be played to save time when the ball in play might have gone out of bounds or be lost outside of penalty area. So we still have those same conditions where when we talk about provisional balls, we're only allowed to hit a provisional ball when we know it might be lost or out of bounds and lost outside of a penalty area. If we know it's in a penalty area, we don't have the option to hit that provisional ball and call it such, or have it be played as such. In that case, it's just going to be stroke and distance if we do that, which we'll get to here.
It still applies still the way it used to, that if the penalty area cannot be seen from the tee, if it's not visible to the player still has the option of hitting provisional ball.
Correct. Or if there's a chance that it could be lost outside, if there's trees, tall grass,
Something
things
other
like that. Right.
Hit the tree and bounce elsewhere, into the golf course rather than into the penalty area.
And the player's announcement that they're hitting a provisional ball, that remains the same.
Correct.
And indicating that it,
Change too. Well, they've loosened the requirements.
Just in case,
you,
that also satisfies.
oh, okay. But
Is that
in the,
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
They've loosened the restriction on the requirement that the provisional word be used.
okay, so
You
that's
sure?
what he just said, all right. And then,
That's not what I wrote, but
oh,
There's
well,
that's not what I have in there.
If
But
you look at
anyways,
18, there's an interpretation later on. that
okay, we'll get to it.
talks about that.
and then with clarifying that, because I know this happened in a USGA event I played in years ago, where exactly that, the hazard wasn't seen from the tee, or it could have been seen, or we weren't sure. And because they did not announce I'm hitting a provisional ball in case the ball is not in the hazard, there was a whole big,
It's lost outside.
Right.
Yeah.
Snap.
You gotta use the
Yeah.
whole statement.
so that still applies. You still
Correct.
have
I guess there's a little.
You still well, we'll get to
We'll
it.
get to
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to know.
All right. So a player can take penalty of stroke and distance at any time, right? So I mean, we can always just go back and play under stroke and distance. We can deem it unplayable, and that's an option under the unplayable. There's lots of different times where we can go back and take stroke and distance, whether it's under a penalty area or an unplayable, but that is always an option to do that. Okay, and then once the player puts another ball in play, that original ball is no longer in play and must not be played. So a lot of times we run into that when we have this discussion about, well, did the player know it was a penalty area? Were they actually taking relief from or hitting a provisional, or were they just playing under stroke and distance because they didn't say provisional or whatever? And then this is true even if the original ball is then found on the course before the end of the 3-minute search time, or in the case of after we've taken relief and we go up and find it. At that point, we're still going to play with that ball that's been put in play under stroke and distance. But this does not apply to a ball to be played from where a previous stroke was made when the player announces that he or she is playing a provisional, or is playing a second ball in stroke play under Rule 14.7b or 21.c3, which we'll get to as the 2-ball rule, and then 14.7b is when you go back to fix a playing from the wrong place. All right, so obviously when the ball's lost, we're going to go back and play under stroke and distance, but now we know that we have 3 minutes to find our ball, and that clock time again starts when we or our caddy or our partner or our partner's caddy get in the area where it's likely to be. So that's a common question asked at qualifiers that have caddies. When does the search time start? It starts when that caddy gets there. So a lot of times the caddies, if they're smart, they won't start looking until both players are there. And then now we know too that the player and the caddy now have an incentive to actually find their ball, and not because if they move it while searching, there's no penalty. Whereas previously, the player was penalized for that if they moved their ball while they were searching.
Caddy also has an incentive to stay behind his player now. So that they arrive at the location. at
Let's
the
say
same time
let's say
they start
even.
the search.
Even. We'll recommend even.
Yeah. That's good.
Or we'll just
Point.
recommend no caddies. So that will help us to play.
That's better.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that here at Meadowbrook though.
No, you shouldn't.
All right, so if a ball is found in this time, so it's 3 minutes, but it's uncertain whether it's a player's ball, the player can obviously identify it. They can lift it to identify it, mark it, lift it to see if it's theirs. And then they're also allowed a reasonable time. So if we have a ball, but we haven't necessarily identified if it's a player, as long as we say the ball is there, and even if it's 20 yards away, if it's before the 3 minutes, we are allowed to identify that ball. Or if, in the case we talked about this previously, where we think another group hit it, if we make that declaration and say we're going to do it before the 3 minutes is up, we still have an additional time to actually go up and identify the ball in that case. But it's not something that can happen after that 3 minutes. It has to be before the 3 minutes is over. And then if the player does not identify his or her ball in that reasonable time, the ball is lost. And then there's a picture, I believe, in the book here that says, I mean, I'm sure everyone has seen this picture. It's on page 157 about whether the ball is in or out. Basically, if any part of it is touching the course, the ball is inbounds. That hasn't changed. And again, we have that one situation in the second half of the picture where the ball is literally completely on the line. I mean, we don't use a ton of lines for out of bounds. We'll use mostly stakes. Some courses will use lines depending on what the boundary looks like. And I think out here we may have used lines for the GAM on 16 there at some point in time. But probably because I think they use lines, so I think we just kept them. But you also see, I think at Detroit Golf Club, there's a couple holes in the back corner there where the cart path runs up, so we used a line there. But most times it'll be stake to stake, and then the inside edge or the course edge of the stake from point to point is that line that defines out of bounds. And this is the reason why we ask you guys to bring string or have string with you, is that if we do need to get the string out, we'll just lay it from that one edge, the course edge on one, the course edge of the other. And typically when we're out marking the course, we'll we will look at the out of bounds, and if there are large gaps, we'll either put a stake in, or if it's right by the tee, we probably won't because it's not going to come into play. But if it's in the landing zone, we'll try to have more stakes in that case. And if you're out there on a trouble hole and you see something and there's a large gap, that say something so we can get that fixed. But as soon as one player goes by there, unfortunately, it's in stroke play. We're just kind of stuck with the way it is because we're not able to change the boundaries during the stroke play round.
And I would assume if you do have a point where the ball's so close that you can't really eyeball it and you stretch the string, I'm assuming you put the string on the outside of the out of bounds stakes. As
Yes.
opposed to
It's
the
the
golf course side.
The course side, yeah.
The
So
course
yep,
side.
yep. So the closest edge to the course from that edge to the other edge.
And if there's a dispute, if the player says, no, my ball's inbounds, and the rules official says, no, your ball's not inbounds, then would you do the second ball option? Or what would you do in case of a disagreement?
Yeah, I mean, the referee's decision is final, but if you're out there and the player says, no, I think this is in, and you're confident that it's not, I mean, that's always an option that you can tell the player will play two balls or have someone else come take a look at it. But yeah, I mean, if you're very confident, just tell them tell him or her that's what it is.
We have a second opinion. If the rover comes over at stroke play and he agrees with the GM official, ball's out of bounds. Is it out of bounds?
At that point, yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, or the
Yes.
head rules.
Even
Yes.
at stroke play.
So the referee's decision is final. I mean, I guess in theory, if the player insisted on, I mean, I
If the
think,
player really insisted, I'm gonna let him play a second.
yeah, exactly. I mean,
That's-
and just mark the spot and
Make sure you-
If the rover confers in stroke play, the ball's out of
Committee.
Well, the committee,
Committee will go over and tournament official in charge,
Okay.
again.
Make sure you reconstruct the,
Yeah.
the event in the areas,
Cell
so
phone.
you can go back and say, here's what we're
Yeah,
talking.
take a
right.
picture.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Get your phone out and take a
Yeah.
picture.
most cases, if you have someone from the committee out there, a rover, or Ken or Ted or myself, at that point we're going to make a decision, and it's pretty much final. But if the player was still like, no, you guys don't know what you're talking about, that's in bounds,
If you're in the back
then
40
player
and
could,
there's no rover nearby, can you take a picture, or is a picture not admissible anymore?
I don't know anything about that, but
Angles.
I would just mark the place with a T after the player hits, so that you know the exact
Mhm.
spot where it was, and then you can make a decision at that point. And then I would also make sure that you mark the spot of the stakes as well,
Oh,
so
right.
that the
Somebody
player
can
doesn't
move
go out
Yes.
there and move it.
Oh, no.
As well.
Oh, dear.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
That
in
would
that
be
case,
bad,
though,
but-
you really want to get someone out there right away. So if you are out there, and you just say play 2 balls, call us or call someone and get them over as soon as possible, so we can figure out.
Okay.
Because we want to let the player know at that point too, where they stand.
And when you have an out-of-bound fence, it's important to know that the OB lines are from post to post, the support post. As you all see, Mickelson, a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago, was
Yes.
on the outside of the fence.
Yes. That was,
The posts were here and the fence had like bowed out.
Oh,
So he was technically on the course, but on the other side of the fence.
I see.
yeah.
So he went over there and tried to hit it right hand and somehow he tried to hit a shot with the fence. I don't know.
Yeah. He was trying to hit it underneath that fence, which was,
Under.
about,
So he was trying to do.
about 2 or 3 inches off the ground. And then, but the ball was still on the course side of the, of the fence. And when he thought he could hit it underneath the fence and get it airborne, but it got caught up in the fence, which was loose, that wrapped it up and then dropped it right down,
And it dropped it out.
dropped it out of bounds.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Is that how he
And
shot 78?
Probably contributed.
That was part of it. That was part of it. I think he took 6. Yes. The club got tangled up in it and wrapped it up. Right. Yeah. That's Phil.
Phil being Phil, right? And then to that point in that example too, this last part here, a player can stand out of bounds to play a ball on the course. So I would imagine,
That was
I didn't
Phil.
see it, but I would imagine that Phil was standing out of bounds to hit
That
that
was,
shot.
yes. He was handing out of bounds. And then when he took the drop, he ended up on the inside, but he took a penalty drop on the course
See,
side.
that's why he was lucky too. He had a bounds.
Yes,
Inbound.
he
Stroke
was.
and distance gave him a reference point. He was able to get a 1 stroke,
Yes.
1 club length
Club relief.
relief. Otherwise, he would have had.
He was, yeah. He wouldn't have had, yeah.
Well, he could have taken an unplayable, right?
First time?
no, not from out of bounds.
No,
It was out of bounds.
He had to drop it.
Oh,
Stroke
yeah,
and
right.
distance.
Okay, gotcha.
It's
Yeah,
stroke and distance,
gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The first time he could have taken unplayable,
Could've,
but
yeah.
the second time it was out of bounds. Then he used he last played from 1 club length.
Yeah.
Got him away.
And that wasn't the day that he shot the 78. That's the day he shot the 68.
Oh, it was.
Yes.
He
Okay.
doubled on the front side
Right.
on 8 and 4 birdies on the back side.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, that's well, I mean that's another example of how the rules have helped players out, and the
Yeah.
players don't applaud the USGA and RNA for that at all. Maybe they do. Maybe Phil did. Phil's a good guy. All right. Here again, we all know this. Stroke and distance is 1 stroke penalty. However, a player can substitute another ball under another rule when it is known or virtually certain what happened to that ball. So instead of taking stroke and distance relief, the player may substitute another ball as allowed under a rule that applies when his or her ball has not been found and it is known or virtually certain that the ball either came to rest in the course and was moved by an outside influence, or was played as a long ball by another player, or came to rest in or on a movable obstruction, or an abnormal course condition, or is in the penalty area, or was deliberately deflected or stopped by any person. So this concept of a kind of a choosy here, where you can choose what you want to do, is still in play. So in all these situations, the player has the option to go back to where they last played from, but they could also take relief under these situations. So the most common one that we see is the player hits a ball, and then we know it's in the penalty area. We know that one of their options is they can go back and play. That's an option in the penalty area, but they could also take relief from that too. And same thing, that the ball was, hit down the middle of the fairway and it went into a pipe. The player can, if they want, they can take relief from a free relief from that pipe if it's known or virtually certain that it's in there, or they can take penalty relief and go back where they last played from. I'm not sure, why they do that, but another example could be if that pipe was in the middle of the forest, they probably wouldn't want to take free relief from there, and they'd rather just go back and play because they're not going to hit the ball from the middle of the forest. Let's see what Joe, what course were you at there where all this happened?
That was, you mean the girls' finals?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at the Meadows at Grand Valley, and they had bush hog or whatever they bushwhacked all the tall grass and reeds down, and they allowed the girls to play from inside the penalty area. Okay. And then there's a Y-shaped, two streams come together about middle of that area and then form one ditch, and many of them hit into the ditches. Ball stayed in the penalty area. It ended up being that day over a 7-hour round, and the committee wisely decided the next day to change the course conditions to a penalty drop area near the green.
Right.
And the next day the round dropped to about 6 hours.
Yeah, that's a tough spot there for sure.
Yeah, I had a 52-minute backup on the tee, 6 groups.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I was the only referee there, and it was all my fault.
Of course. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did they take the medals off, or which one did they take off for the high schools? I think one of them. They took off Bedford. They took off East for the boys. They're playing the Fortress instead.
Yeah. I thought they took off Bedford.
Yeah. I don't think Bedford's on there this year for the boys, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. If they still keep the medals on there for the girls.
I think they are.
Yeah.
I think they rotate the captain in there every few years, don't they?
Right.
3 or 4 years.
Right. Yes. Khaki at Ferris State.
Oh, Ferris. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still up there.
Yep.
They had khaki cousins at OU about 5-6 years ago, but I heard that's never going to be repeated.
Yeah, that'd be a tough one for sure. All right. So a provisional ball. So if a ball is might be lost outside a penalty area or be out of bounds, to save time, the player can play another ball provisionally under stroke and distance. Okay. Now, for a ball that might be lost, when the original ball has not been found and identified, it is not yet lost. And when a ball might be lost in a penalty area, but also might be lost somewhere else, but if the player is aware that the only possible place the original ball could be lost is in a penalty area, a provisional ball is not allowed, and a ball played from where the previous stroke was made becomes the player's ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance. So we talked about this, and this is a common situation. If we are playing out at Eagle Eye, and on the 9th or 18th hole, if we hit a shot and it goes in that big big lake there, pond. I mean, we know it's a penalty area. I mean, if you can't see that, you probably shouldn't be playing golf.
You might not get home.
Right, exactly. So that's an example there where we know it's in the penalty area, but we might have a different place where, like Tom, you were saying earlier, it's a blind shot, and you go over the hill, and you're like, oh, there's a big lake there or whatever, and I had no idea. So that could definitely happen. But if we know it's there, as soon as that player plays even if they say I'm playing a provisional ball, it's not a provisional ball. It's the ball under stroking distance.
But the provision that it had to be done before going forward is now gone.
Correct. So now, as Gene is saying, you can walk forward and then come back and say, oh, and I'm going to hit a provisional now.
As long as the 3 minutes hasn't happened. Is that what that first bullet says?
Maybe.
It says when the original ball has not been found and identified and is not yet lost.
Okay. Yep. So right. So as
So
long as
you've got
the 3 minutes.
2 minutes and 59 seconds to go forward and look, and then you can still go back and try provision.
And then when you come back, do you get your last second to find it, or
I don't.
Yeah.
probably right?
And then there's second hand going.
Yeah. So, but I mean,
we're going to go back. When does the clock stop for the 3 minutes? If I start walking back after 2.5, is the clock still going?
I would say
I think the clock keeps going.
Yeah.
If there is anything that says the clock stops.
Yeah.
Okay. Clock keeps going. So I guess at that point, right? Exactly. Or if you're
back at the tee, did never visit
Yeah.
before it's 3 minutes up.
right. So I guess in that case there'd be really no. I mean, once your clock's started, you probably want to keep searching.
Yeah.
There really be no incentive to go back at that point.
And who would usually start this clock, monitor the clock? The player, the playing
Yeah, I mean,
partner?
it's usually
Does anybody really set their why? I don't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if there's a rules official
gotta-
there,
Right.
but quite often a rules official is
That-
not there, so then
Right.
what?
That's the missing in action problem. you
Right.
got.
Yeah,
If there's nobody
How
there,
long you been looking?
yeah.
Right.
So it's an
Rely on
estimate.
their best judgment.
Yeah, and then you exactly right. You ask that player the question:
Mhm.
How long have you been searching?
How
They're
long
gonna
do you
tell
think
a
I have
minute.
been looking
They've
for
probably been
this?
looking for 3.
Yeah, there's a girl's
Exactly.
junior say, oh, about 10 minutes.
Right.
They don't
Give
wanna
her
lose-
5
they don't wanna
more.
lose golf balls.
Probably a good idea to make that a positive. I think I've been looking about 2.6 minutes.
2.6 minutes.
And then,
Tenths of a
yeah.
second.
and if nobody argues with you, then move on. But
You figure out how they got to the
yeah,
0.6.
Right.
So, but yeah. So I mean,
but that's what you got to do when
most
there's
most cases
no
you're going to
official
come on
there.
the scene. That's the first question you ask is, okay, whose ball are we looking for? What type of ball are we looking for? How long have you?
how long you been here.
How long have you been searching for it?
Yeah.
And then start your clock, and then once it gets to 3 minutes, and a lot of times we typically probably get on the scene. I mean, I guess just using my own anecdotal evidence, we probably usually get on the scene a minute to 2 minutes into the search.
Yeah.
And so this year it's going to be a lot tighter because we only have 3 minutes to find it. It'll be interesting to see. I mean,
You'll have more
not
more
even
events where
get pulled into.
it's
a lot
already
of them
expired.
because-
Oh,
right.
yeah.
So
Right.
If the parent tells you they ate a sandwich while they were watching,
yeah,
Then
yeah, safe to say it's been 3 minutes.
And if you get there and they tell you, oh, we've been looking 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever,
it's lost.
then you would just have to say, okay, that's it, we're done.
Right.
It's lost.
Yeah, and a lot of times this is good that we brought it up. But usually, what you want to do is as that time's going down, players know, okay, we've got 30 seconds, we got a minute. And then when we get to that last 10 seconds, I'll usually start counting it down
Right.
out loud so that everyone that's in there knows we're down to our last second. Okay, so if a player does hit a provisional ball, the player can hit another provisional ball, and that bears the same relationship to that provisional ball as the one did to the original ball. So, hopefully you don't have it, but we've definitely had it before. I think it was at Fieldstone I was at a couple years ago, and player just pop, 3 or 4 of them off the first tee, and you just pray to God that they find that first one, because otherwise it's like, oh, well,
They all have
they're,
the same marking.
yeah,
It doesn't
they're
matter.
done.
Go back to the tee and
they're
hit
not
7.
qualifying. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I found the first one. So
all right, that's good. But yeah, so they can keep hitting, and that's one thing as a starter. It is tough, but if we don't have a ball in play, just keep making them tee off until we have them. Because the worst case scenario is they hit 3 shots, and then they have to come back because they didn't hit that 4th one. Just have them keep hitting, and if it makes them feel better, just tell them, well, it's good practice. That's the way I look at
Only time you get to
provisional
do
balls.
that.
Your bag is lighter.
Just another practice. That's wrong. Maybe it's an actual shot if
Won't
I
get
don't
charged
find
for
it.
range balls.
Right, exactly. All right. So announcing the play of provisional here. So before the stroke is made, the player must announce that he or she is going to play provisional. It is not enough for the player only to say that he or she is playing another ball or is playing again. The player must use the word provisional or otherwise clearly indicate that he or she is playing the ball provisionally under Rule 18.3. So, Craig, what's your
The interpretation on that is on page 261, 18, 3B/2. There's given an example there where a player would clearly indicate he's going to play a provisional ball by saying, I'm going to play another one just in case.
Oh, so that's
So-
okay.
That's okay.
It is.
I guess.
That's what they're saying in the interpretation. If they clearly indicate they're playing a provisional ball,
so basically they need to say the word provisional. They need to say they're going to play.
No.
Hold on. I haven't finished.
It's
They need to
it's
say
not
the word
in here.
provisional,
It's in
or they need to say they're playing the ball under Rule 18.3 B or 18.3, or they need to say I'm going to play another one just in case. So if they say anything else, it's not a provision.
It's
if they clearly indicate they're going to be playing a provisional ball somehow, if that's their intent.
That's crazy.
Think of another way to say it that's not that.
I know if you read
makes
the
sense.
next page, it's not good enough to say I'm going to reload or I'm going to play another. It's not. Yeah,
So you got to just in case.
Yeah, that's not.
Just in case. I don't know. That's-
Shall we recommend they say provisional?
Yeah, so,
I
I
would.
think we'd recommend
Yeah.
they say provisional.
so that
It's probably our good judgment to tell them to use the word
Yeah.
provisional.
I
It's a good measure.
Right.
Could you say on the tee, you mean you're hitting a provisional?
Because
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a common thing where the player will look at us if I'm sitting in my cart and they just hit one near out of bounds or whatever, they'll start grabbing another one and they'll get ready to tee it up, and I'll say, and you're hitting a provisional, correct? And you would do the same thing if you're playing with someone as well. As long
Yeah.
as long as the word provisional is mentioned, you're going to cover that.
Mentioned and they acknowledge it.
Just in case. What if you said? I think honestly, if you said just in case, I think that's the key phrase there. Is that it's just in case. If you say I'm going to reload just in case, I would say that would be good enough.
That would qualify.
I think really that key phrase is just in case, because you're implying that you're playing provisionally.
That's an interesting one too. In the decision that says, such when the player has returned to the teeing area after briefly searching, so he's there alone. The player is considered to have correctly announced that he or she has the intent to play the provisional. So if the player's there by himself too, if you're going back, that's considered that. Yeah,
Right.
that's.
They're just answering the age-old question: if a tree falls in a forest and no one's there, it actually does fall.
Yeah,
And
it does.
And it does make a noise. According to the USGA, it does.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
They seem to think so.
All right, so provisional ball being played. So we got the writing, but really the best way to look at this is just through the picture here. So when we're talking about this, I mean, the player hits their original ball in this tree area, and then when they do hit a provisional, they hit it shorter to point A. They can keep hitting that provisional ball until it's until they hit it at rest at a point that's farther or closer to where the hole is, or near where the original ball is.
That's a slight change, because it used to say if the ball was provisionally comes in play if you played it from the point where the original is likely to be or closer to the hole. Now, if you play it, you're allowed to play it from the point exactly where it might be. It has to be the closer.
It's closer only. Okay.
It's closer only, but if you play it from a point where the original is likely to be, that's still a provisional according to this new wording on the top of page 159.
Okay, I better read the wording then.
It says play
Good
from a
catch there.
spot that is the same distance or farther from the hole.
Yeah.
Farther from the
So
hole.
the same distance, that's new.
So it's
Which is the same as likely.
yeah. It's I mean I
But
I
it's
read
still
that as the
estimated.
same, right? I mean I
Still
don't think that
about
that's,
here.
Yeah.
I mean I guess if
Yeah, it's
it's
still an
if it's a
estimate.
couple yards off, then
Oh, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
saying that, But it used
Yeah.
to say.
But the
if
wording
you're-
itself is different.
If you're there in that area
right.
in the past, and
Right.
you played it from there, now it was in play. Now they're saying if you play it from that area, it's still a provision.
They did change the word. It used to be closer.
It used to say if you play the provisional from a point where the original was likely to be, or from
It
a
became
point
the ball in
closer to
play.
the hole, it became the ball in play. Now they've taken this from where it is likely to be and made that still a provision. Which makes sense, because you're going out there to search for it.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna have to look at the wording.
It says,
still-
on the top of page
Yeah,
151,
splitting
the
hairs.
player may continue to play the provisional ball without losing its status as a provisional ball, so long as it is played from a spot that is the same distance or farther from the hole. from the
Gotcha.
original.
Okay. Gotcha.
Same
so
distance,
so
same
it's
farther.
saying
Distance
it's saying that
is
saying is where it was likely to be.
So that's the
Gotcha.
starting point.
now
Is
provisional when it
Yeah.
used to be,
Gotcha.
on the other side of that.
yeah.
So going back to this picture here, you've got basically if I hit my provisional to the middle, see if I can do this the same line, probably not.
Yeah. If you play it from there,
Here,
it's still a provisional.
then it's
Mhm.
it's still a provisional. But as soon as I hit it from point B
Yep, yep.
or anywhere in here,
2 paces in front of where you were before.
that is a big difference. Yeah, good catch on that.
It's recognizable.
Why aren't you teaching this class?
I'm just reading it.
Words make a difference.
So, all right,
Used
so
to be
so
her pet rule, so she knows that one.
Yeah, that's why Jeannie keeps
and
the
then we can
this copy and the other one, and then mark them both up.
so we can keep hitting that provisional ball
She's got all of her
several
notes
times until we get to that
in the
point
margins.
that's beyond.
Oh, yeah.
So right, so we can still hit it, as Gene was saying, we can still hit it from the point that's equidistant or in the same distance, but not farther. Sorry, not closer to the hole. Okay, so when does a provisional ball become a play? It becomes in play in either of these two cases under stroke and distance. When the original ball is lost anywhere on the course except in a penalty area or is out of bounds, the original ball is no longer in play, even if it is then found on the course after the end of the 3-minute search time, or is found nearer the hole than had been estimated, is now a wrong ball and must not be played. So if we play under stroke and distance here, or we let's say that let's go back to the picture there. If we hit from a spot that's far, or closer to the hole than where we are searching, and then we walk up another 20 yards and we find the original ball, it's too late at that point, and the ball that original ball is not in play, and we're going to continue to play with that provisional, even though the ball is on the course and inbounds. It's just not
Now
in
in
play.
your pocket.
Right. That's one of those things, and this happens too. You'll have you'll be with the player and they're searching for five minutes, now 3 minutes, and then as soon as they go back, you find it. In that case, I've always just either picked up the ball or put my card over the ball, and then go back after the round and say, hey, I found this after.
Yeah.
I don't tell them I found it right after they left.
Oh, by the way, I found this. Yeah.
Right.
After you move forward.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Continued fun.
All right, and then when a provisional ball is played from a spot near the hole than where the original ball is estimated to be. So that's the one we just talked about here. And again, in that case, the original ball is not in play, even if we have found it on the course. Do you have a question, Mike?
Yeah, I'm arguing with him.
Inside or?
Can you declare the ball lost at any time and tell the competitors not to look for it?
So that's a good question. The question was, can you declare the ball lost before the 3 minutes? So you cannot declare a ball lost. You can do things to make it lost. So, but you'd have to do one of, you'd have to do something to make it lost. You can't just say it's lost. In your example, if you don't want to play it and you don't want people to search for it, you can tell them that. But until you actually go up and actually hit the ball from a spot that's near the hole than where that provisional is, or where that original ball is. Sorry, not provisional. Where that original ball is, it's still not lost.
So you snap hook one, and you know it's red stakes. You know it's in the garbage. You get your next one, 280 down the middle. Call it a provisional ball, and one of your competitors goes over there and starts looking for it.
Yeah, they'll do that.
Just run up to your ball 280 and hit it.
But he's
Right.
allowed to look for it.
Yeah, you can't stop them.
Yeah.
You can't tell him to get out of there.
Beat them to the spot. Get up in front of them.
Match play I
Oh,
could
it
think of
did.
a few years ago.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Right.
Once the ball is stopped, you
Yeah.
gotta run up and try to come.
At any time, if you hit a ball somewhere where you don't like where it went, you just take another ball out and play another ball under stroke and distance.
Yeah.
Which
Don't
makes
announce
the
it.
original loss.
All right.
Don't announce it.
Right.
Yeah. Don't say provision.
And the other example I always use, and this is when you still hit a provisional. I hit a crappy shot in a par 3. My next shot, I hit it darn near the hole, or it's like this far away. As soon as I hit that shot, I'm running up to the green and hitting it. I'm not letting anyone else. I'm going to stay out of the player's way so that I don't get in their way. Good etiquette. But I'm going to get up and hit that putt as soon as possible. Yeah, exactly. But in that case, if I do say it's a provisional, and then I happen to hit a good shot, that's not my ball in play, or that original ball is not lost until I actually hit that provisional.
And I get this clear then, as a referee, you're driving over players' balls that have been lost, and now as a player, you're running up and playing out of turn. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wanted to clarify that.
Right.
Just don't do it, man.
Oh,
That's all right. I'll do it at match play. Let him recall the shot. I don't care. I'll make that tap in again. All right. If the player plays the provisional ball into the same general location as the original ball and is unable to identify which ball is which, we talked about this a few weeks ago. If only one of the balls is found on the course, that ball is treated as the provisional ball, which is now in play. And then if both balls are found on the course, the player must choose one of the balls to be treated as the provisional ball, which is now in play. And the other one's treated as lost and must not be played. So this is if they're both in the same general location. And we're assuming the worst here in both these scenarios. So we're gonna basically get penalized for not marking that provisional ball or identifying it. I shouldn't say marking.
Find a different number.
Yeah, exactly. Or putting a different color dot on it. A lot of kids, a lot of coaches I've found after being out to some of the clinics and stuff is that they just tell their players to put a big P on it for provisional, which I've never heard that before, but it's not a bad idea.
of course, if they all put P on there, then
Right, exactly.
which P is yours?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Uniquely identified,
Yeah.
different than the other ones.
All right, so an exception here though, a player may substitute another ball under under another rule when it is known and virtually certain what happened to the ball. So in the same cases we talked about previously, if in this case the player can choose to abandon the provisional and take relief from these situations. So again, even though we have, so this is a good example here. Let's just say, for example, that we know that the ball came to rest in a abnormal course condition, or let's just say a pipe in the ground, but it was in the middle of the forest. The player still has the option in this case to play that provisional ball, even though they found their original ball. So there's a few examples where the player still has a choice. Most of the time, if the player finds their original ball, they have to play or proceed with that original ball. But under these three situations here, the player has the option to play the provisional ball. Okay, so they came to rest in the course and was moved by an outside influence. Came to rest in the course in or on a movable obstruction or on an abnormal course condition, and it was deliberately deflected or stopped by any person. And most of these are going to be, most of these are going to be free relief. So unless the player is in a really bad spot, they're probably going to continue to take these free relief options. And then when one of those rules applies, the player may either substitute another ball as allowed or treat the provisional ball as a ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance. So if I hit my ball and it ends up in a pipe in the middle of the trees in the forest, I know it's in there, but I can't find it. I can just say I'm not going to actually play from it. I'm just going to play my provisional, even though we're saying that we've quote unquote found our ball because it's known or virtually certain that it's there.
What if you actually find it though? Then you don't.
Yeah, you're right. Correct. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. Correct. So if it has been found, you have to play that ball. Correct. So yeah, you're right. So if it is found, it's there. But if it's known or virtually certain, then you have the option. But it's known or virtually certain you haven't found it.
That's probably not going to happen if it's in the woods. There'd be no known or virtually certain if the ball is lost in the culvert.
I was just trying to give an example.
I know.
You just crush it. Ruthless. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I'm joking. No, I mean it's. I mean, I guess one to think about is that you have a ball picked up by another person, and someone saw it happen, and it was in a really bad area, and you hit your provisional down the middle. You would just, in that case, you would just play your provisional.
Mm-hmm.
Or you saw it go into a dumpster, and you don't want to play from the dumpster, and you're not going to go in there and find it, but you know it's in there, and then you're just going to play it
after Taco Tuesday.
Yeah. All right. So when must the provisional ball be abandoned? So it can be abandoned in either of these two cases when it has not yet become the ball in play. When the original ball is found on the course outside a penalty area before the end of the 3-minute search, so obviously we know this, we're going to play that original ball as it lies, or when the original ball is found in a penalty area or is known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area. In that case, we abandon the provisional ball and the player can take relief or play from the penalty area at that point. And so that's a common question that we get is, well, can I take a drop here if it is known or virtually certain that it's in the penalty area? As long as there was a chance that it was lost outside that penalty area, then yes, they can actually take a drop at that point. But they have, when they hit that provisional, they had to be certain that it could be lost outside that penalty area. Number 9 or 18 at Eagle Eye, there's no way. You know it's in there. So as soon as that player hits that quote unquote provisional ball, it's stroke and distance. The ball is that ball is in play. The provisional ball is not in play. Okay, and then in either case, the player must not make any more strokes with the provisional ball, which is now a wrong ball, and all strokes with that provisional ball before it was abandoned, including strokes made and penalty strokes from solely playing that ball, do not. And then again, if we do play a wrong ball or from a wrong place here, we're going to have that 2-stroke penalty, which I think every rules school I've went to, they've had this question, a similar question where the player does this, they play another ball under stroke and distance, either they find their ball or they go up and they pick up their original, one that they played under stroke and distance and then drop from the penalty area, and then you have to figure out how many strokes they made, and it ends up being like 11 or 12 or 9 or some big number.
Yeah.
But that's when you draw your T bar and you count your strokes and your penalty strokes to get to that number. And when the player does play from the wrong place or plays the wrong ball, that's going to be a two-stroke penalty there.
Unless it's a serious breach.
Still a 2-stroke penalty, but then they'd have to go back and fix it. Yep. All right, unplayable.
I got a couple of questions. Sorry.
No, that's yeah.
18.3
Uh-huh.
is going to come into play a lot more with the 3-minute search.
Likely to, yeah.
So the player's guide says, when your original ball is found in a penalty area or is known or virtually certain to be in the penalty area, you must either play your original ball as it lies or take penalty relief. And Janina, I think you mentioned that in a USGA event. I know Tom Anderson and I have had that on the course. The landing area is not visible. The player played a provisional. You get up there and the woods is marked red. If you know your ball went left,
Right.
you can't play that provisional.
Got to go back.
Or you have to take a drop.
Take the drop or whatever. Yeah.
Correct.
And that's going to happen a lot if it's a 3-minute search.
Right.
Better hit a provisional. You can't play that one in the middle
Right.
of the fairway. You have to go in the woods and take your drop.
We'd have to go in the woods and take the drop. You'd have to take the drop. on the
Along,
line
yes.
under-
Now, what if, in this case, what happened in Denver, there was out of bounds, but then there was also red.
Penalty area?
So who knows whether it went in the red area or whether it went in the out of bounds area?
It's still a player's best judgment.
I think it went
and
here,
you're
and
playing
hope everybody
Yeah,
agrees
it
with
was
you.
a real
Known
doozy. It
or
was a
virtually
doozy. Even the
certain.
USGA wasn't quite, they argued about that for a long time.
Right.
So,
That would be because
Maybe-
of the new code of conduct and everything in the player's judgment.
yeah,
It would be the player's best judgment or his opponent. His opponent says you
well, you
definitely crossed
you
the
tagged
mark.
it and it's
Yeah.
You
past that
definitely-
again.
Here's the edge.
Yeah,
You crossed where it was white, not where it was red.
yeah.
So even if you don't know that there's a penalty area up there that's red, and you hit a provisional because you think it might be lost, that's marked as red, the provisional has to be picked up, it's no longer out.
If you're virtually certain the ball
Yeah.
went
Is in
into
the
the
red,
penalty
yeah.
area, yeah.
Yeah, and then play.
And certainly if you find it in there, if it's
Yeah.
visible,
Yeah.
if it's visible, then,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Then you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Unplayable. So, yeah.
In Dan's scenario, getting into the woods, how would he know that, would you say it's virtually certain that the ball ended up in the woods? To me, that, if no one saw it, that,
Only if you find it.
to me, kind of negates the known or virtually certain. Well, obviously, if you find it, you know, but if, as an official, if, you know, you're,
Yeah. I think maybe if we maybe elaborate on Dan's example, let's just say that the entire woods is marked red. It's just
Yes.
red all the way down the length of the hole, and the player hits a shot. They didn't hear a loud crack or anything like that. I think in that case we still have a virtual certainty that the ball's in there if it's not found outside at that point. But you're right in saying that the whole thing would have to be marked red. It couldn't be just part of it and then woods after it, or woods before it and then red. You know, I think Dan's example was just the entire tree lined area was marked penalty area.
I think is that Lee?
Yeah.
I think you go back to asking yourself the question, is there anywhere else it could possibly be? And if the answer is yes, then it's a lost ball.
If you've got a lot of high grass outside the wooded area, then that definitely brings into
Could be
question
there
where the
too.
ball is. Yeah, it could have bounced out of the trees, right?
Sure.
You don't really know at that point.
You get a creek moving water.
Yep.
Same
That
thing,
too.
right?
Yep.
Ball can be in the creek.
Yep.
All right, unplayable. So rule 19, unplayable. Not a ton of changes here. Just really to.
Kyle, this is Joe Bolter. Before you go on, I put a chat question there.
Oh, yeah.
On the 8th at Grandview. I was doing the boys regional there. Moguls all along the right side of a hazard, running down the left side of the fairway. Players were beginning to hit provisionals when the ball was clearly headed in the direction of the hazard, but you couldn't see the balls if they got through those moguls, whether it ended up on the moguls or bounced right, left, or where it went, or was in the hazard. Provisional allowed there?
I'm not familiar with the course too much, but I think just looking at what you wrote down, I mean, if the penalty area is not visible from the tee, I think in that case, yes, for sure. If the penalty area is visible, and then those moles are there, but there's no other tall grass or trees, then I think it might be a different answer. But if it's not visible, definitely yes, provisional allowed in that case.
Okay.
All right, unplayable here. So rule 19 covers the player's several relief options for an unplayable ball. This allows the player to choose which option to use, normally with 1 penalty stroke. We'll talk about a new option with 2 to get out of a difficult situation anywhere on the course except in the penalty area. So again, in the penalty area, we're not allowed to take an unplayable. We can take an unplayable anywhere else in the course except the penalty area. Okay, and then the player themselves, he or she is the person that's able to determine whether their ball is unplayable. Okay, so it's not you or me deciding if it's unplayable or not. The player could say it's unplayable from the middle of the fairway. Phil could have said it was unplayable after he hit his putt and gone back and played where he putted from before last year at the U.S. Open. That's up to the player to decide. And again, just to reconfirm, it's anywhere except in a penalty area. Okay, in a penalty area, we're just going to take penalty area relief. And now if it's unplayable in the general area or on the putting green, okay, so these 2 specific parts of the course, it's going to be 1 stroke penalty, and we've got our options. I think there's a good picture. I've got a picture with the bunker, but there's also a picture just for this general area, our putting green. But we can go back to where we last played from. On page 164 is the picture. So we can go back where we last played from. And again, from that point, if it's in the teen area, we can drop in that teen area on the green. We're going to place the ball there. Or if it's somewhere else in the general area, we've got 1 club length from that point in either direction. We can also go back on the line with the flag and where the ball was, as far back on that line as we like, or we can take lateral relief, which we're going to define as that 2 club lengths from where the ball is. So those last 2 spots are from the spot of the ball. So a lot of people get confused. They think it's the nearest point of complete relief, and then 2 club lengths from that. Unplayable is 2 club lengths from the ball, and the line back is on where the ball was and the flag.
There could be some times where you only have 1 option and not the 3, correct?
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Okay, so like if you took the 2 club length, you're still in the bush.
Right.
Okay, or if you took the line of play and you're back in Ohio,
Right.
You have to go back to this.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
can always take the second unplayable out of the book.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
You could take, you could get 2 club lengths and then another 2 club lengths after you drop if you'd like.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. So these we already when we go back again, we talked about this just to go over it again quickly. When we go back on a line, that reference point is going to be where we choose on that line. So either where we put a tee in the ground, or if we don't put a tee in the ground, where it first hits the ground on the correct part of the course, and then that relief area is defined 1 club length from that reference point, no closer to the hole. And then it also needs to be in, it can't be, and we'll show this here in a sec, but if we get into the bunkers, where if we're going into multiple areas of the course, it has to stay within 1 area of the course. It can't go from 1 area to another after the relief area cannot contain multiple parts of the course. If you're going to drop and you want to drop in the penalty area, just using an example, your relief area is going to be only that part of the relief area that's in the penalty area. And then vice versa, if you wanted to drop in the general area, that relief area is only going to take that or look like that option that's in the relief area. So if we picture the half-shaped pie and half of it is penalty area and half of it is general area, we have to choose which one we want to drop in. But our relief area goes from being that 1 club length pie to just half of it. But we have the choice as to which one we want to drop in. And you could have that scenario this year, especially with some other areas marked as penalty areas that aren't really water.
It's just being
Correct.
Just to clarify, if we're not using a reference point and we're going to drop the ball for the reference point, we still can establish the relief area after the ball's dropped. We can pick it up and drop within that relief area. Again, no penalty.
I mean, the ball goes outside the relief area.
No. You're allowed to drop. It says there, if the player drops the ball without having chosen this point, the reference point is treated as being the point on the line,
Where it
same
hits.
distance where it hits.
Right.
Okay. So now that's the reference point. So now can I still establish the relief area from that reference point and drop again?
No.
No.
It's already dropped.
Yeah.
It's done.
So basically, if you don't pick a reference point, wherever it hits the ground first,
That's where it's
that's your
gonna play.
reference point.
Yep.
And then if you did need to redrop, it would only be because the ball rolled outside that relief area, which is defined by where it first hit the ground.
Right.
1 club length. In this case, 1 club length.
In 2 separate areas involved. Where does the rules that tell you that there's an order of all those things that you have to make a determination on deciding what you're doing? Because there's a particular order that you have to use.
Yeah, I think it's like rule 2.2 or something like that. Well, that one is really just saying if your ball is touching 2 parts of the course, it's going to where you are on the course is defined by this certain area. But you're in this case, you still have the option to choose which one. You're not dictated to say that I have to do it in the general area or I have to do it in the penalty area. You have the choice here. But if your ball was touching the line and touching part of the course, what that rule point, what rule 2.2C, is that what it was, Marv?
It is.
2.2C is saying is that the ball in that case is in the penalty area.
Page 24.
Priority. So determine which one is based on that order.
Right. All right, lateral relief, again, 2 club lengths from where the ball was, no close to the hole. And then the same concept of if we have 2 different areas of the course inside that relief area, you pick one and your relief area is defined by the area of the course in which you drop it in. All right, so now we're gonna unplayable. It's 1 stroke penalty for normal relief options, or what they call normal relief options, the ones that we already know. Again, we just went through those, but it's a 1 stroke penalty. And then again, when the ball is dropped, it has to come and has to hit and come to rest inside that relief area. However, if we're in a bunker, in this case, we have we have a few more restrictions on what that looks like. So the picture will be show. We're also going to talk about a new relief option only in a bunker, is to take a 2-stroke penalty for under the unplayable and take it outside of the bunker completely. So this picture here, it's on page 165 and up on your screen here. So you got, if you're taking an unplayable in a bunker, okay, you've got all your 3 normal options under 1-stroke penalty. So we can go back in this case to the fairway where the player last played from, and 1 club length from that point, no closer to the hole. And then you can see when they go back in a line, they picked a point that's still inside the bunker. You have to stay inside the bunker for a 1-stroke penalty. And that relief area is completely inside the bunker. And the player, they could go back a little bit farther if they wanted. If they wanted to come back here, that'd be fine too. But when they take it on a line back and under a 1-stroke penalty, has to stay in the bunker. And then the 2 club length options, you can see here that in this case, it's not a complete 2 club lengths half circle, because it's cut off here. The relief area is cut off by the edge of the bunker. And the player can't drop here, even though it's technically within the 2 club lengths, because the ball has to be dropped in the bunker here for a 1-stroke penalty. And the new option, the new wrinkle, is to be able to take it back outside of the bunker for 2 strokes, and you use the point was in the flag and keep going as far back. So that same reference as that back in a line, but in this case we're allowed to go outside the bunker, but it's going to cost us 2. So I'm putting it out there. The next time there's a pro tournament at St. Andrews, I'll bet anyone here that a pro will use this option.
Yeah, they
and if anyone wants to take me up on that, $5.
No, I would.
So
I think they will.
Any pro,
Yeah.
limit that to take anybody in the leaderboard.
yeah, any pro.
Yeah.
That's too far.
Before they make a cut. After the cut, it might be a little fairer, but
Now, does this rule, have there been any changes made to if there is a dangerous situation in a bunker?
No dangerous situation. Dangerous animal.
Okay, well, let me just relate one thing and you tell me. I was playing in the quarterfinals of the USGA Amateur Public Links years ago, and my ball came in a greenside bunker that was infested with thousands of bees. And then my ball was right in the middle of the bunker. Thousands of bees.
yeah, that would classify as a
Well,
dangerous animal.
Well, okay, that's what I'm wondering,
Right.
because what ended up happening, and it was Kendra who made the ruling on this, that there was really no relief other than these situations. And I ended up running in the bunker and hitting the fastest bunker shot known to humankind, a good one, by the way. But I still remember my opponent stomping up and down. Well, you're not going to let her take it out of that bunker, are you? I guess if I was dead, then it'd be okay. So I guess what I'm wondering is there really were no other options, no free options.
No free option.
There were no free options.
You could take it out for a 1-stroke penalty.
But the whole bunker was full of bees. So, and there was another bunker, but it was 150 yards
I was going to say, did they
back.
also consider a bunker of a similar?
They did,
condition?
but there
Yes.
was no bunker that was close
Yeah.
enough to do that. Well, I could have,
Yeah.
but it ended up being that there really was no other relief than
Yeah.
to take a
Just run in there and
stroke
play.
penalty. But in that bunker, that would not have worked, because I'd have probably got stung picking the ball up
Yeah.
and dropping it. So, and this wasn't in play then, the
Yeah.
2-stroke. But I ended up going in
Well,
and hitting it anyway, and I
Well, you
might
could
have
have
gotten
taken it
stung
out for a 1-stroke penalty.
Right.
Correct?
Bottom of page
Stroke
one.
and distance.
Do you have this?
No.
well, taking it out, but where?
Yeah, stroke and distance.
It says that when the dangerous
On the grass?
animal
Okay, so
condition
that,
interferes with the play of a ball in the penalty area.
okay, that was not an option at that time, or at least that was not an option given to me. So is that new? That's why I'm asking. Yeah.
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 I thought, didn't we talk about this?
Yes,
That
we did.
I thought you could go out, no?
Because that ruling came right from the top USGA official.
I played a course where
Not,
they
not,
had
not
those
free
bumpers,
relief, but for
but
one
they
stroke penalty, I think.
told
you
us
could-
ahead of time
what,
that we did not
could
have to
leave.
play out.
Free bunker?
Yeah, for a
Yeah.
one stroke penalty.
So now you can take it out of, well, but see, now you got the two-stroke thing.
Hold on.
But
It's
it's dangerous.
16. It's in 16.
What is it, 16-2? But the dangerous situation is it's kind of a different
Mhm.
thing.
So basically, well, the picture you want to look at is on 137 or 16.1C is the diagram.
Okay.
And that basically in that case here, under dangerous, you could take it out using
Okay.
that same line, but for a one stroke penalty.
Okay, so, but you could take it out on the grass back,
Correct.
only if it's a dangerous situation or
Or if
abnormal.
it's an abnormal course condition.
Okay,
Mhm.
which, okay, so that is a different option than I would have.
But it's a penalty.
Right, but
though,
it's, right,
penalty
still.
stroke. Yeah, so
got
if
it.
you wanted to play it without getting penalized, like you did, you ran in there.
Ran and hit it right. Okay, all right, thank you.
But it is testimony for pace of play. You can run up to your ball and hit it.
It was
You don't have to
fast.
take
It was
2
fast, but
minutes.
doggone it, I missed the putt. I hit about 6 feet and missed the putt. Oh, no. So lost the hole, but.
Kyle, this is Judy.
Yeah.
I have a question just to clarify, because this happens out at OU with the bees in the bunker. Do I remember that we decided once that they could drop in another bunker with a similar drop without a penalty? Or am I remembering that wrong?
No, it used to be that, but not anymore.
Right, and that's right. I
Right.
could have done that with no penalty, right,
But it has
before,
to be in this
Okay.
proximity.
right. Or bad.
Well, yeah.
So there's no way with a dangerous situation to get free relief and get out of the bunker, right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, rule 20 here. Resolving rules issues during a round, rulings by referees and committees. So if we just weren't out there, we could just skip this rule.
Hmm.
All right, so Rule 20 covers what players should do when they have questions about the rules during a round, including the procedures which differ in match play and stroke play, allowing a player to protect the right to get a ruling at a later time. The rule also covers the role of referees who are authorized to decide questions of fact and apply the rules. Rulings from a referee or a committee are binding on all players. That last part's pretty scary. All right. So players have to avoid unreasonable delay. So what that means is that basically the player, if they have a question on the rules, they can't just sit there and wait for a referee if it's slowing down play. So to use an example from some of my past experiences, we had a player who literally had a question about the rules, and they just literally sat there and their group kept playing. He sat there and waited. And a couple groups played through, and then he finally got, like, one of us finally went out there, and the guy asked a question, and we were just like, you're DQ'd. Like, you can't just sit there. Like, I'm sorry. And obviously he didn't like that.
No.
But so in that case, it was stroke play. Players should, if they don't know what to do, which we'll get to in a sec here, they're just going to play 2 balls. But they can't just sit there and just wait for a ruling. It's one thing on the tours where they've got an official or a lot of officials, and they've got a walking scorer, someone with the radio on every hole with every group. It's a lot easier to get a rules official out there. But for some of our events, the players are just going to have to play 2 balls. Or if it's an event where Tom is on the front and Craig is on the back, and they're just going to have to play 2 balls because they're just not going to be rules officials out there. Okay, but so there's a couple scenarios here on what we can do. A player can obviously ask for help from an official or ask for ruling in match play, but we might not always be there. And then in that case, there's a couple procedures on how we go about handling that. So first, we'll talk about match play here. So unique to match play. If the players in a match are not sure what to do and they agree on how to decide a rules issue, that's fine, provided that they're not doing it to ignore or to deliberately ignore any rule or penalty they knew applied. Okay, so they can't just say that, hey, you know, we're not gonna. Anytime a ball goes in the penalty area, we're not going to count it as a stroke, and we're just going to get free relief. They know that that's the rule. They can't do that. But if they come up and we're at a point and they say, I'm not sure if it's 1 club length or 2 club lengths, they can agree and say it's 2 club lengths. And even if that's not right, that's fine in match play. Okay, but if a referee is assigned to the match, the referee must rule on any issue that comes to his or her attention in time, and the players must follow that ruling. So some events that we do will have a referee assigned to a specific match, and others will just be out there looking at multiple matches. And so there's a spot in the book that we're going to look at here in a little bit to look at how that is defined. But if there is no referee, if the players do not agree or have doubt, then either one of them is going to request a ruling. So if Dennis thinks I'm doing it wrong, I'm as a player, I'm going to do it, and then Dennis is going to say that's not right. I want a ruling, and then whenever the committee gets there, they're going to make a decision as to what I actually did, if it was right or not.
The way I'm reading this is they can also ask before anything's done. Because we have, in some of our match play tournaments, we have people out there riding around in carts, but they're not referees.
Right.
But I'm reading this, that if something comes up and neither player knows what to do, and they see somebody sitting in the cart, they have the right to ask.
Ask a question.
And I think the way that it's defined, we're going to get to the big book to look and see. There's actually like a section in the committee procedures that defines what a referee is and how their roles can be limited or restricted, and that will help answer that or provide more clarity. Mark's answer is right, but okay. So ruling request made before the result of the match is final. When a player wants a referee or a committee to decide how to apply the rules to his or her own play or an opponent's play, the player may make a request for ruling. If we're not available in a reasonable time, we're going to figure it out as soon as it's brought to our attention and get that taken care of. Okay, now if the player makes a request for ruling before the result of the match is final, a ruling will be given only if the request is made in time, which depends on when the player becomes aware of the facts creating the issue. So if the player becomes aware of the facts before either player start the final hole of the match, when the player becomes aware of the facts, the ruling request must be made before either player makes a stroke to begin another hole.
Uh-oh.
Dun, dun,
Dun-dun.
Time out.
Doggone computers.
Thought I was going to be able to make it.
Well, I could throw this out there while he's doing that. The USGA committee member that taught rules school said that they're switching from a walking rules official to stationary rules officials.
Really?
Match play?
They're going to zone defense and
Yeah.
getting away from the man.
Yeah. I mean, on TV, you always see, you know,
With the exception of Augusta. Augusta has an official hole by hole, generally sits in a chair and
well,
they don't-
USGA, but okay, so Augusta has
Yeah,
their
they've
own,
always had
and they have a
It's
stationary.
not PGA, it's not USGA, it's
Yeah.
Right.
invitational.
Interesting. Did they say why that they were doing that, or
No,
just
Guys didn't
Well,
want to
the
watch.
official
Nobody
getting
really-
older.
Because the rules official should have been aware.
Yeah. They weren't sure they can get from hole number 1, number 2 to 3.
that's
I mean, on
That's
TV, you
interesting.
usually see a rules official with that group, you know, but for USGA, they're gonna
Yeah.
have,
that's too
An
bad.
official on the
I
hole.
mean, I don't know. It's interesting that I mean, I think for those of us that have walked matches, I think it's nice to walk with the same group the entire time, right? I think it's part of the experience to be able to just enjoy a round of golf instead of just sit on one hole. But I don't know. Usually in basketball, when you switch to zone, it's because your team is not good at defense. So maybe they're indicating that the referees aren't as good as they used to be. I don't know.
Yes. By sitting in the cart, because you only have to deal with what's gonna happen on that hole.
Yeah. Right.
When you're walking 18, you gotta know the whole book.
Right.
And that may be part of it.
Sure.
They just don't have as many as they used to.
Right. Yeah. Well,
If you've got an official sitting on the hole, how many do you need in a day? 18.
18.
If you've got one walking with a group, you need 50.
Right.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
64 is the most for match play, right? Was this match play or stroke play or
Anything.
Well,
Anything.
Yeah.
In the tournament for 64, it's only 32 matches.
Right.
Right.
Everything's got stroke play in it, even before match play. You've
I
gotta
guess
have a
it's
group
still
of-
32 versus 18.
No,
Yeah.
in men's amateur,
Right.
women's amateur, you've got 128 players.
Right.
Trying to save
Planning
on lunch.
groups and things. You gotta have a whole bunch of officials.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if we had I don't think we had a walking official in stroke play with a couple that I've been at. Definitely match play, but not. I don't think stroke
Yeah, we
play.
did. The women did.
Did you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the senior amateur women, I was on that committee, we had some walking scores. But it was really near the end of the finals, semifinals and the finals.
Yep.
Right.
Then there was, everybody was on a hole.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, when the U.S. Amateur was at Oakland Hills, do you recall?
Yeah, it's all stuck in
I
the
walked.
snowdrift.
Yeah, I think my recollection of what I heard during the rules school was that for the major, the U.S. Open, the Women's Open, they'll still have officials with every hole, but some of the quote-unquote lesser championships, they'll do it by stationary.
Okay.
So for match, and certainly for match play, I think my recollection again from the October was that they'd have a referee in every match.
Right. Right. Yeah. I would imagine so. All right. We'll make sure to find out, Tom. Remind me if I don't ask when next week or whenever it is.
Yeah, it is next week. Thursday.
All right.
Yes, Mark tomorrow.
Yeah, you're right.
He's PGA.
Yeah.
That's very different. They only have 3 or 4. On that. Out there.
All right. When the player becomes aware of the facts during or after the completion of the final hole, the ruling request must be made before the result of the match is final. So in that case, if we go to Rule 3.2A5, someone finds a page number before I do, yell it out.
28.
28. So in this case, the match becomes final when the result is recorded on an official scoreboard or other identified place, or when the result is reported to a person identified by the committee. And then there's also some other procedures on how, or some scenarios where the committee can define when that match is final. But in our case, it's probably going to be when it's put up on the scoreboard. Is how we would define that. Okay, and if it happens before that, then we're gonna act on it. So if the player, if the player does not make the request in time, a ruling will not be given by a referee or the committee, and the result of the hole in question will stand, even if the rules were applied in the wrong way. Okay, so even if I did it wrong, if Dennis didn't say something, to the committee in time, I would be good to go in that case. Okay, but if the player requests a ruling about an earlier hole, a ruling will only be given if all three of these things apply. So the opponent breached Rule 3.2D, giving wrong number of strokes, or was failed to tell the player about a penalty they incurred, and the request is based on facts the player was not aware of before either player made a stroke to begin the hole being played, or if between holes the hole just completed. And after becoming aware of these facts, the player makes a request for a ruling in time, as set out as above. So as soon as this is brought to your attention, and all three of these apply, we can give a ruling about an earlier hole, but all three of these things have to apply. So I mean, I'm not saying that it won't happen a lot, but there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for us to give a ruling about an earlier hole. And in most of our match play scenarios, we are going to have either someone walking with the group, or someone watching a couple groups, and we really the only time we'll actually have to worry about this in our events is when there's not a walking referee, because the walking referee is going to handle that, he or she will. But this is probably a very common scenario at clubs, I would imagine, that you find out on hole 7 that someone was cheating on hole 2 or gave you wrong information. You want to get a ruling.
Yeah. You stop
All right,
playing
so
and call a pro shop.
Yeah. Ruling request made after the result of the match is final. So we still might give a ruling in this case, but only if both the request is based on facts the player was not aware of before the result of the match was final, and the opponent breached Rule 3.2D, giving wrong number of strokes or failing to tell a player about a penalty and knew of the breach before the result of the match was final. So they'd have to knowingly cheat and give the old wrong information, give it wrong number of strokes, or failing to tell a player about a penalty. So the key there is that they knew of the breach. So if they didn't know the breach, it's too late. But if they knew that it was a penalty and they just didn't tell us or tell the opponent, then we could or we would make a ruling in this case. And then there's no time limit on giving such a ruling. However,
Go ahead. I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I say, however, we obviously have, if it's a match play bracket tournament and the player goes on, obviously at that point, there's really nothing we can do for that player that may have won his match or whatever, her match, because it's the other player already started playing, the next round started. But that doesn't mean that we can't, we'll get to this, I think, in a little bit. That doesn't mean we can't DQ that player that did that.
Right.
My question has to do with something that happened during match play for Women's Metropolitan Golf Association. On the last hole, I thought the match was even, which it was. My opponent said, "Oh no, you won, congratulations." And I said, "No, I think the match is even." And she insisted I won, and that was that. So she left the course. I reported the results. She had second thoughts about it, came back to the course later, maybe 20 minutes later, and made a big fuss because in rethinking about it, she decided that, oh wait, the match was even and we should go into sudden death. And well, the committee ruled that, well, you left the course. Janina tried to tell you that it was even and you left. And so that's how the results were posted. Now, this was, like I said, only about 20 minutes after the end of the so-called end of the match. And so the ruling was that the match stood as conceded, and she's hated me ever since. So. I mean, but you try to do the right thing, but But I guess my question is, when I see this, there is no time limit on giving such a ruling.
As
How would
long as
that?
She doesn't leave the course.
Okay, so had she
Well,
not left the core, or but then
think-
how long is
I
too
think,
long?
I
or
think it's, so.
the
if
next
you-
match was the next day, so it
Yeah.
wouldn't have had
I- I-
another
I think
match.
if you-
She didn't become aware of any new facts.
No,
in that
no,
20 minutes.
no, there was no.
Isn't there something though, if you concede, it's gotta be a done deal?
Well, it's, I mean, she didn't necessarily concede it, so I
Well,
think if we.
well, no,
if
she
we
actually
turn-
congratulated me and said, "You won. Congratulations, you won." I could, no, I didn't. Yeah, she.
So I think if we turn to page 31 in the book, there's a say that's saying knowing the match score, and basically what it says here is that if the players mistakenly agree on a wrong match score, that it's going to continue on
Okay.
as that. But it says here in the case of the last hole, which is in your
Right.
example, before the result of the match is final. So again, that would come down to if they announced it, they put your name up on the scoreboard. At that
And
point in
it's-
time, it's done.
Yeah.
But if that didn't happen, you could go back out there.
Yeah,
and
because
continue.
I never agreed that
Mhm.
Right.
that I won and she lost. She
Right.
was the one that kept fighting that, and I went, well, how can I? If she's
Right.
not going to go play the
She's not
extra
gonna play
hole,
it, yeah.
then what can I do? There's
Didn't
nothing
have
I
a
can do.
scorecard to go back and just,
Well,
1,
of
2,
course,
3, I'm
yeah,
one up,
she
2,
did,
3
but
up.
So if it's conceded, you shake hands, nice job, you won the match.
that's what she
But
said.
it's not been
Yes.
posted up there, it could still be tied, and you keep on playing?
I mean,
Well, she left the course. The result was posted, and then she came back.
But the result was posted.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
that's.
I would say that typically that would
Yeah.
be a concession, but I think in this, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just saying that I think in this case, because there was some disagreement or some confusion about what the state of the match was, it could not, it might not be 100% a concession in that case.
Well, wasn't the old language such that you could concede a hole, a match, a stroke
At any
But-
time.
at any time, but
And
you
that's
had
still
to
the
make the
case.
concession.
Correct.
You had to make the concession loud enough for someone to hear. Not
Correct.
you won. That's not a concession.
Well, I don't know. Congratulations. Congratulations, you won the match. That's, I don't.
That's kinda like
conceding the
Yeah,
match.
I don't-
That's about all you
I
need.
think-
I don't
think
know.
Still, though, I don't think it's a concession, and the reason I say that is that I think she just thought she lost. She didn't necessarily concede the match. She just said that I think you won one up, and
But
and
I
then-
told her it was even,
exactly.
so
So I
I-
think there was just a discrepancy of
Mhm.
what the actual state of the match was,
Mhm.
and by her leaving and not agreeing that it was all square, you guys agreed that it was in fact you won up, and you have to take that as soon as it says here, they can only be corrected before either player makes a stroke to begin another hole, or for the final hole before the result of the match is final. So I think as soon as that your name goes up on that board,
As soon as she
it's-
left the
it's over.
course.
But it's
and,
not a concession because she
Match is
believes
over.
that she lost the match. She didn't concede it.
How about the interpretation on page 45?
Well-
You were reading.
No, is that the right answer?
Well,
What was that, Jean? I didn't hear it.
page 45 of the big thing. Is knowing match score, the players are expected to know the match score.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. Yep. Right. Yep.
Well,
Just gives an interpretation.
All right. So, and then in
Well,
match play, go
Well,
ahead.
let me just ask this question. Is there any language in the new set of rules here that is to be like how we use provisional ball? That's no question you're playing a provisional ball. Is there any language about concessions and what designates when a hole is conceded or a match is conceded? Is there any language that is proper or official or?
I think there's a lot more leeway. It can also be actions too, not necessarily just words. So you could go, Like a lot of
Like pickup.
Yeah, I mean, you see it a lot on tour or whenever in the match play. The players on that walk into the next hole and they just say they put their thumb up.
Or that big controversy when they walk to the next hole and that stroke was not conceded.
Right.
So it seems like there would be something that would be more concrete. So that 3.2B.
Yeah.
In the big book or the little book?
So either one, but another one. So here it just says that the concession can be done either verbally or by an action that clearly shows the player's intent to concede the stroke, the hole, or the match, such as making a gesture.
To me, that's just not sessions.
All right, we're gonna finish. We're gonna finish Rule 20 here. All right. In match play, we can't play two balls. We know that. We have to continue on, and the person is gonna do what they want, and if the other player disagrees with it, they're going to request a ruling. All right, and rules, issues, and stroke play. Skip, we don't have any. Right? No. Okay. If we're not, so this 20.1C is just the first part of it is just some normal things, but then the third part of it is the old rule 3-3. Okay, so in stroke play, we obviously we can't decide by agreement. So if the four of us are playing and we say, oh yeah, that's ground under repair, you know, that's not that doesn't work. In match play, that's okay, but in stroke play, that's not okay. And basically, we are at the whim of the committee at that point to say whether it's ground under repair or not. Right. Okay, and then we're obviously, the players are encouraged to help, but again, if Craig and I are playing and I think I'm a hot shot and know the rules and tell Craig something wrong, Craig's still going to get a penalty in stroke play.
Yeah.
And then if we do have issues, we need to tell the committee about it. So that's one thing when we're at the scoring set. One of the questions we typically ask is, did you have any rules questions today, or did anyone play two balls? And that's just to get them to talk about these things if they had issues out there. And then the players should also protect other players in the competition or protect the field. We use that term quite a bit. So if I'm walking and I see someone 2 fairways over dropping the wrong way or cheating or whatever, you know, I have the obligation to say something, and if I don't, I can be disqualified. Okay, and then it could just be too, I mean, even if I'm not 100% sure, it's something that I should bring to the committee. So if I see something out there as a player, I need to tell the committee, hey, I saw something happen on hole number 6 to this group. You should ask them what happened. But again, we want to do so as soon as possible, and we don't want to do it with a negative intent. So we're not going to sit at the scoring table, turn the cards in, 5 minutes later come back and say, oh, by the way, the player in my group, they cheated on hole 3. You want to tell them, the rules committee, as soon as possible. If the player did something like that and they did it intently, we would probably DQ that player for doing that. We'd probably, the other player would probably get penalized as well, maybe DQ, but that player would definitely get a stern talking to and more than likely a DQ for poor etiquette. So they need to say something, as soon as possible. Now, it could be, and that's another reason why in the scoring tent, we typically will add up the cards if the players are patient enough to sit and wait. We'll add them up and we'll read the score back to them and say 36, 36, 72, and that gives the other players the chance to hear what they shot, because if you're playing with someone and you don't hear what they shot, and then all of a sudden you look up at the scoreboard and it's 76, and you're just like, no way in hell did that person shoot 76. I mean, at that point, we like to get that before the group leaves the table, so that they're not going to get DQ'd in that case. But the player could come back and say, I was playing with Craig, and there's no way he's an awful golfer. He can't shoot 76. No offense, Craig. Sorry.
That's in the minutes.
Yeah, exactly. All right, but this rule 20.1C3 is our new Rule 3-3. So again, I've said this before, but I think this is one of the just unfortunate things that happen with the rules is that most people knew what Rule 3-3 was. No one's going to remember 20.1C3.
Let's call it 501c3.
Maybe in time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's probably for everyone's benefit to just start calling this the 2-ball rule instead of using the number. I mean, maybe we use a number, I don't know, but I think most people still know or understand the 2-ball rule. And really, it's stayed pretty much the same. There's just a few modifications on how it works. The first one is there's no longer an announcement requirement to the group, but the player needs to decide to play 2 balls. So they can't necessarily hit a shot and say, oh, I think I'm going to play 2 balls now. They have to announce that they're playing, or they have to decide to play 2 balls before they take action. Okay, so in all reality, it's going to be an announcement. It's just that they don't necessarily have to make that announcement, but they're going to decide to play 2 balls. So they're probably going to tell someone when they do that.
Especially if he's coming up the fairway with 2 shots.
Right, exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
you're taking practice.
Hold it.
And
Didn't you just hit one? Yeah.
And the same thing. So when we do play 2 balls, the player should choose which ball that will count. They're not required to, but they should choose which one they want to count or identify that one by announcing that to their marker or another player before making a stroke.
So if it's a should choose, why do we even have that rule if it's not a requirement?
Because if you don't choose, then the score with the first ball played counts.
Yeah. So it's basically just saying that the player isn't. If that was must, then there would have to be some penalty if the player didn't do it. So we'll see that in a little bit. The player is going to get DQ'd if they don't. So the player must alert the committee to avoid being DQ'd. But in this case, we're just saying that if they do announce which ball they want to count, great. If they don't, we're going to have a procedure to figure out which one it is. As Gene said, it's going to be that one that they hit first.
It
used to be the original ball.
The original, and we
Right.
told them it didn't matter which one they hit first. Now it
Right.
matters.
So,
Right.
yeah, because I just don't understand why, if the committee's going to make the decision as to which procedure is the correct one, then what does it matter what the player chooses?
The best example is a ball that's in ground under repair. So in that case, player can play from ground under repair or they can take relief.
Right.
And so in that case, the committee needs to know which one to count because both are right by the rules.
I see.
And so we need to know if the player says, I want this one where I'm taking relief to count, then they're going to count that one because both technically are played by the rules in that case.
Okay.
Okay, and then as Gene was saying, if the player doesn't choose, the ball played first is going to be treated as the ball chosen by default.
Okay.
And that's a change.
Okay.
So you might suggest to a player that he play the one when he takes relief, and that's the muddy spot.
Play hard.
Play the one from the relief area first. You know, if he hasn't said anything. Then
Right.
That's a good point.
Players
Because they could.
that.
Because they could play whichever one first, couldn't they?
Yeah,
if they
it
wanted
didn't
to.
matter.
So
Now it makes a big difference.
yes.
Gene, you just said something that I just had to laugh at. You said the players should learn the rules.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
You really mean that?
All right, and then the last one here we talked about, but again, the player must report the facts of the situation to the committee. If they don't, they're going to be DQ'd. So even if they score the same, they make 5 with both balls, they still need to tell the rules committee what happened. And the reason for that is that they might have actually got a penalty with both of those balls, and their score is actually not a 5, it's a 6 because or a 7 because they played from the wrong place in both spots. Just throwing out there as an example. And if the player made a stroke before deciding to play a second ball, the rules does not. This rule does not allow that, and the score that counts as a score played with the ball before the player decided to play the second ball. But there's no penalty for playing the second ball. And then the second ball is not the same as a provisional ball. And then I think the other thing, I don't know if it's in here, but it's not. It's the 2-ball rule. not the 4-ball rule or the 3-ball rule or whatever. You pick two balls. You don't. I'm not sure if it's this, or this. It's 2 balls. Okay, so how do we decide which one is going to count? Okay, so the score with the ball chosen is going to count, or if it hasn't been a choice by the one that's played first, is going to count if the rules allow the procedure used for that ball. If the rules do not allow the procedure, then the score with the other ball counts, provided that that ball was played by the rules. And then if both balls are not played by the rules, then the one that counts is the one will be the ball chosen by the player or the default, unless with that ball there was a serious breach. And then if that's the case, then we'll choose the other ball, even though they're going to get another, even though it wasn't technically by the rules. And then if both balls were played from the wrong place, well, that's just bad luck for the player, and they're going to get DQ'd. And so the other thing we tell players is that when they play 2 balls, they're not necessarily absolved from penalty. They still could get penalized. They still might end up getting DQ'd. It's just that they'll have a better chance of not getting penalized and not getting DQ'd if they do that. And then these rules are just saying that we're going to go through this procedure to figure out and try to get the right ball in play with as few as penalty strokes as possible. And then all strokes with the ball that does not count, including strokes made and any penalty strokes solely from playing that ball, do not count in the player's score. So if the player was playing a second ball, and they had a pace of play penalty or something like that, or a code of conduct violation, they wouldn't be absolved from that. But if they hit the ball in the penalty area and they took 1 stroke relief from that, that wouldn't count if that ball doesn't end up being counted. Okay, this thing that says rules allowed the procedure used means that either the original ball was played as it lies and the play was allowed from there, or the ball that was played was put in play under the right procedure and in the right way and in the right place under the rules. So in this case, if we think about ground under repair as an example, I mean, that satisfies both those conditions. And so that's why it's important, just using that example, to say which one you want to count for your score. All right, rulings by a referee. The referee is named, and again, referee applies to both stroke play and match play now. There's no difference. And then a referee's ruling on the facts or how the rules apply must be followed by the player. And we talked about this before, that referee's decision is final, but if the player does want to get a second opinion, then that's fine. Someone can come over and provide that. And it's a good recommendation that if someone does question, to allow them to have to get a second opinion. And then eventually they're going to ask Mick or whoever, and then Mick's going to say, "Well, I am the second opinion," and then go for from there. So, but it's always good to give the player that option to request a second opinion if they really like. Obviously, if you're 100% sure, then they can just go on. But if they do want it, it's a good idea to give them that option. All right.
If you don't assign all these GAM people as referees, what are they called as an option? Can they be called a rules official that doesn't have this kind of authority?
So I think that's going to be in section 6C here. Oh. We can just give them the general factorum. Right, J-Dub? So section 6C is committee procedures. It's 422. All right. So really quickly here. So referee and match play, and we might not get through all this, but basically, we're definitely not going to get through all this, but because it's pretty long. But it's a good It's something that we reference in our match play guidelines that we should have up shortly on the website, but also deals with a lot of different things and what happens. And it's actually like a lot longer than I thought it was.
Yeah.
So we're definitely not going to get through it, but we'll definitely spend some time on this next week because it is important to look at. See, basically, the committee can limit the roles of the referees or the committee members or whatever, but then they can also, it talks about here, if you look at this, the first part of match play, it says when you're assigned to one match, you're going to be with that match throughout, and you're responsible for acting on any breach of the rules that he or she sees or is told about. But when it's multiple matches, you're going to have a few other things. So if a player in a match asks for help, you can go in there and help or make a ruling. Or if a player's in a match may be in breach of a code of conduct, or if they agree to ignore a rule, all these other things, pace of play, you can jump in at that point. So it's a really good way to just kind of see what role you have on the course that day, whether if you're watching multiple matches or if you're tied to a specific match. And then, Gene, I think to answer your question, there's still going to be referees, but they wouldn't necessarily. Not all referees are necessarily part of the committee. All right, and then this, I think, that's too important to skip over. All right.
Are you bringing election?
Well, the minute you call them a referee, then doesn't this rule 20-20A apply that the player has no right to appeal? It says that the referee can call in help, but it doesn't give the player that right.
Well,
because it says the player has no right to appeal a referee's ruling.
Right.
Right. So at the end of the day, if you as a referee is saying, no, I'm not going to get outside help, or I'm not going to get a second opinion, the player has to accept what you say. But you can agree to the player's request to have a second opinion.
I know, I realize that the rules official can, but the player can't. Is there no way to limit that?
Maybe.
Well, we can do that.
Yeah. The role of some members may be limited. Examples include. So yeah, there's quite a few there.
Yeah, they get
which we can go over.
get a lot of.
Yeah, we don't let trouble hole officials make
number 6
pace of play decisions, penalties.
Right, or ground under repair, things like that. That should be done by a rover or official in charge.
But what she was asking about what players' disagreement with the decision is number 6.
Okay.
On page 425.
Right.
Well, it says the committee can adopt a policy that always allows all sides a second. That would have to be adopted.
Right.
On the hard
right. Yeah, and so I think we'll get to the rest of this because we still have a few other things and to go through and whatnot. So, yeah.
Just to correct or clarify what I said earlier about and what Dan's question was about USGA and stationary officials.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the opposite of what I said. They currently and this year they use stationary officials for all of their open championships. So everything else, for match play or amateur championships, then they would have walking officials, but not for the open.
Okay, gotcha.
Or whatever it's worth.
Right. Okay. No, that's good to know. And then I'll probably go over this again, but the rule 20-3 is really it's nice, and basically it's just saying that situation not covered by the rules is just the USGA saying just to make it up. So if we don't know, just make it up. If it's not in here, just make it up. Anyways, we'll cover a couple of the last things in 20 and then go through 21, 20, 22, 23, any of those rules that talk about events that we're going to have. So we're going to do a Stableford event this year. So we'll talk briefly about that. We'll talk about 4-ball events, alternate shot events, all of which we have. And then we'll probably do some quizzing or some rules quizzes next week as well. We should finish with all that before the 2 hours is up. All right, appreciate everyone coming, and again, thanks to Meadowbrook for having us.
Being available?
Yeah.
Oh.
Next week, they're gonna be back.